religious movies for Lent, Monday Musings. If you've given up TV for Lent, this probably isn't going to be the movie to watch. Lent obviously is a time when we're making sacrifices, maybe giving stuff up, adding stuff to our life, and so might be a time there's lots of religious films. So Lent may be a time to watch some religious movies during the season of Lent. For this, I'm going to be focusing on movies that would have, somewhat of a Lenten theme. They're not all going to be explicitly Lenten movies, but they all have some connection to the season of Lent. Important with religious movies, not all these are explicitly religious movies. So there's lots of movies that have lots of religious connotations, even though they're not explicitly religious. Think of movies like Les Mis or even Slumdog Millionaire. So these are going to be more explicitly religious movies. We'll begin with probably what seems to now be the best Lenten movie ever, and that's The Passion of the Christ. It was directed by Mel Gibson, and I remember seeing it in the movie theater some years ago, and it was probably is still. Usually try and watch it at least sometime during Lent, and it probably is, from what I can tell, the best visual representation of the crucifixion. So it is kind of gory, so it might not be appropriate for younger audiences. There were actually priests who were on set, and to make sure it was historically as accurate as possible, and it is all filmed in the biblical languages, so any speaking parts are in Aramaic, Greek, and Hebrew, and and then there's subtitles underneath for those, but it is a very moving depiction of the Passion of the Christ, and so it is certainly a very vivid portrayal of what Christ went through in those hours leading up to his death on the cross. There's also The Passion of Saint Joan of Arc. This is a movie I particularly like. This may not be for everyone. It is very old. It's all in black and white. Any speaking parts, all you see is music. So there's no speaking. Whenever they speak, they then cut off to a separate screen where you see the words. It is in French, and then they have the English subtitles underneath. And it tells a story of the trial of St. Joan of Arc, apparently when she was sent to the church court to be tried for heresy. They kept very accurate records of all that, and so this tells the story leading up to when Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. And so particularly moving with this is before she is burned at the stake, not a mystery that she was burned at the stake, she's a martyr. So that's at the end of the movie, obviously, and particularly moving before that is when she was denied receiving Holy Communion as she was going through this trial, and before she is executed by being burned at the stake, you see her able to receive Holy Communion. So the shots are very much focused on just the characters of St. Joan of Arc and also the clerics who were trying her for heresy, and so you just see very up-close pictures of their faces, and it is a very accurate and moving story about the trial of St. Joan of Arc. Again, this would have to be you would have to want to watch a movie like this, being that it is very old, it's all in black and white, no spoken parts. I found it, I've seen it a couple times, and I've found it very, very interesting. There is another movie called The Young Messiah, and this was actually based on Anne Rice's book Out of Egypt, which is basically trying to be historically accurate to the hidden life of our Lord, as we often say, which is those years after his birth, before his public ministry began. And so it tells a story of the younger years of our Lord. In this movie, I did like the depiction of, we're in the year of St. Joseph, I did like the depiction of St. Joseph in this movie. I thought that was a very interesting portrayal of the relationship between our Lord and St. Joseph. Mary, I kind of liked. I've seen some better depictions in other movies about Mary, but it is a very interesting telling of what our Lord's hidden life could have possibly been like. There are some questions I had about what we can call the divine consciousness of Jesus. The scriptures say that our Lord grew in wisdom and age, so he was an infant, and as an infant he would have acted like an infant. As a child he would have acted like a child, and so his understanding of his mission as the Messiah would have, as the scriptures say, he would have grown in wisdom and age. Some of the ways they depict his divine consciousness in his younger years, I was a little skeptical of, but even the Catholic news services gave it, an okay review, so there's nothing contrary to the faith. Just some ways I might have liked to have seen that portrayed a little different, but it is a very interesting telling of, again, the story of the young Messiah, and they do, kind of interesting about it, they do show Satan in the movie, and the interaction between Satan and our Lord in those younger years I found to be somewhat interesting. There is another movie called For Greater Glory, which stars Andy Garcia, Eva Longoria, Peter O'Toole, so some famous actors, and it tells the story of the war of the people of Mexico against the atheistic Mexican government. So often and it is a historical drama, so often, we see the Mexicans as strong in faith, and they are, and because of that, we sometimes forget of the intense persecution that the Mexican people had to undergo by the atheistic Mexican government. And so it does tell the story of, what some Mexicans had to live through at the hands of an atheistic government. So there's also The Mission, and this does star Robert De Niro, Liam Neeson, Jeremy Irons, among some others. And the movie actually begins by basically tells the story of these 18th century Jesuit missionaries who are going to a remote South American village, and they're trying to obviously help convert them to Catholicism, and they're also doing that to help them from the rule of a pro-slavery Portugal government. And so and the movie begins by showing how these South American tribes weren't that open, and they place a priest on the cross, throw him over the river, over the falls, and he's put to death. And then it goes on to see how these missionaries continue to operate in this remote village and the impact they have. And there's a particularly moving scene close to the end with a priest leading this tribe in a Eucharistic procession as the government is going to, and I won't tell any more, but as the government is going to, have some confrontation with them. It did won an Academy Award for Best Cinematography. A lot of these movies have won awards. There's Of Gods and Men, which tells a story of some Cistercian monks who were in Algeria, and they lived in harmony with Muslims in that time, and then things begin to get hostile between Christians and Muslims, between this particular monastery and the Muslims. And so particularly moving about this is as it begins to see that there's going to be violence in their village and towards them as monks. You see how they have to make a decision whether they should stay in this land where they've done so much to help even the Muslim population, or whether they should go to, flee and go to a more safe place. So you see kind of the deliberations that they have to go through in order to get to that process. It is a particularly moving movie, and they won many awards, but they also won a Cannes Film Festival award. Then there's also Into Great Silence, which was a 2005 documentary about some Carthusian monks at Grand Chartreuse Monastery in the French Alps, and this is all silent, so you have to be wanting to watch this. It's a completely silent film, and so and actually the idea was first proposed to these monks in 1984. The director said he wanted to come and, film the monks and make a, silent documentary about them. And then some 16 years later, they said that they would allow their monastery to be filmed. Monks so often don't live, because they're monks, they often live in a different sense of time. So the director basically thought that nothing was ever going to happen. And then the monks, again, 16 years later said, okay, well, you can film here now. So it is a very moving depiction just of the ordinary life of the monks and what they go through. And again, there's no sound because the Carthusians don't speak. No artificial. Basically, the director was just there in the monastery by himself. No artificial light was used, and there is a particularly moving scene at the end where one of the monks do actually speak, and again, they are French, so you get a translation of that. And they did win many awards. Very moving documentary about Carthusian monks, and they did even won a Sundance Film Festival award. Then the last one that I'll go through is The Prince of Egypt, and that's, I have to go quick, it's an animated adaptation of the Book of Exodus. The voice cast includes many famous actors, Val Kilman, Michelle Pfeiffer, Sandra Bullock, Jeff Goldblum, Danny Glover, Helen Mirren, Steve Martin, Martin Short, and there's a whole bunch of others. And so it does just tell the story of the Book of Exodus, and it is an adaptation of that, so it's not just a strict retelling of the Book of Exodus, but it is an adaptation. So just some Monday musings on some religious films you may want to watch during this Lenten season. See you soon, St. Catherine's.